Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a live recording of the Can You Make It Pretty podcast live from the D3 conference in Cleveland, Ohio. Had to check my notes and make sure I knew where I was at. I'm Jeff Julian. I am the Chief of Staff and VP of External Affairs at Harper College. I'm the immediate past president of NCMPR, and I used to host this podcast. And believe it or not, they fired me, and then I took a little time off. I reflected, got my mind right, and then they offered me this chance to come back and fill in for Matt and Emily, who are doing an excellent job hosting this podcast. So it's my privilege to be back here filling in for them. And we have an excellent guest today, fantastic guest. I'm happy to introduce you to Dana Shaffer. Dana is the Senior Creative Manager for the Purell brand. Yes, that Purell, the hand sanitizer. It's based in Akron, Ohio, which the notes tell me is about 40 minutes from here. Dana, welcome to Can You Make It Pretty? Let's give Dana a round of applause. So I was thinking about this morning, Dana, and I was trying to imagine maybe like a third grade Dana writing in class, writing down, what do I want to be when I grow up? In writing, I want to be in the hand sanitizer game.
I don't think I knew what hand sanitizer was then. Right. Because it wasn't invented until 1988.
Okay. So maybe you wrote down, I want to be in the big soap game.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That was correct.
Yeah, right. I picked up that energy that it was, no. So how does one get into the hand sanitizer game? Tell us your journey that led you to Purell.
So let's start back at third grade.
Okay, please.
Actually, it is interesting because I remember always wanting to be a writer. And I didn't know there was anything to do with that other than, write children's books at that age.
Okay.
That's very
natural.
Limited view of the world
Right.
at that point. And I do wish that I had known as I was studying, what the opportunities were in marketing.
Yeah.
And, I ended up in journalism, after I grew out of the children book phase. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I can be a journalist. And I found that was a miserable experience for me.
No, do we have any recovering journalists in the audience?
I hear there are some of you here. Yep.
Okay, I see hands, which is always good on a podcast. Yes. I see hands.
There are hands here.
I don't hear them, but I see them.
That was a miserable experience, and I started to work my way into marketing by picking up experience with nonprofits. Yeah. And using my writing to write about things that I really cared about. And I was able to shift that into a career. And for me, it was always important that I was using my talents to promote something that I believed in, mm-hmm. that I was never marketing something that made me ethically feel icky. And so it wasn't necessarily that I was really fascinated in hand sanitizer, but as I'm looking at brands that I'm like, okay, I could get behind that. I could care about that. I like their values. I like what they sell. I can wake up in the morning and feel good about what I'm doing. Hand sanitizer fit the bill, and Purell was a really great company with good values.
Excellent. So this probably didn't affect the Purell company at all, but there's a little thing that happened in 2020, early 2020, the pandemic. Did that ring a bell for you all over there?
A little, yeah.
Okay.
Jog my memory.
Well, so it was a global pandemic, and the world shut down. Yeah. And
Okay,
we're not even getting a laugh line here, folks. Come on, I worked hard on these things. But that's right when you started, right?
It is. So I was working in the jewelry business previously, and I had been there a while, and it was, I was looking for a change, and Northeast Ohio is replete with some really incredible national brands. And I found Gojo, that's the company that owns the Purell brand, and I was like, this sounds interesting, and I shifted over to that, and then 6 months later, a pandemic hit, and it was an incredibly wild time to just be starting at the company. but also, energizing. Like I didn't have a lot to do when I first started, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And I always apologize to people that I willed this into existence because I was like, oh, I could really use something with a little bit more teeth, and then a pandemic hit. So
it seems very coincidental. Did you know the pandemic was coming when you made this shift?
No.
Okay. All right. So, what was it like? I mean, that has to be, you come into a job, and I think this happens a lot to our folks in the audience who are all, communicators and marketers, that you think you're going in one direction on that specific given day, right? You've got, okay, this project, I'm going to finish this up, and then all of a sudden something breaks, something happens, campus police calls, and woo, we've got a problem that's going to suck up the entire day. So what was that like for you and your team to go from, hey, we're repping hand sanitizer, and now we've got a global pandemic and our product is somewhere in this mix?
Correct. And the recovering journalists will understand this. It injected energy for me into the situation, like you're in the newsroom and you're just having like a humdrum day and you're trying to figure out like what on earth you're going to put on the front page, and then bam, something hits. Okay, now there's a lot of energy in the newsroom, right? And that was a really similar experience here. Like suddenly there's like a lot of purpose to what you're doing. There's a lot of like intention to the decisions that you're making. You're shaking up things that like, oh, this is the way we've always done things. No, that's done. We have to think of a whole new way to approach this. We have to get inventive, get new. I hate saying this because it was a pandemic and a really horrific thing we all endured together, but also like it injects a certain level of energy into the work that you're doing and really gives it an extra layer of meaning.
Yeah. Can you talk specifically maybe about a marketing strategy or communication strategy, social media, that emerged because of the work you all had to do related to the pandemic, or maybe something that you shifted because of that?
Absolutely. It immediately stopped being about sell. Obviously, that wasn't the problem that needed to be solved anymore. There was no like, oh, you really need to buy Purell. No, everyone was buying it. That was not the problem anymore. It became more about the responsibility that we felt that we had to the general public. It became about messaging about like what's going on, what do you need to know, what are these other hand sanitizers that you are seeing out there on the market, and like what should you be looking for and what should you be aware of? It was about the ways that we were focusing our efforts on essential workers and the places that needed it most. When people in this room think about Purell, we're really thinking about, you go to Target, you go to Walgreens, there's Purell on the shelf there. Most of our business is to other businesses. So we sell into hospitals, restaurants, schools. Those places desperately needed us to be able to open up again, to be able to have what they needed to take care of the well-being of other people. And so our focus was entirely there, and it was really about getting that message out there rather than sell.
It can be hard, though, to stop that machine, right? When you've got all of this going in one direction. And I think of our schools when we have to shift, but we've got all of this enrollment messaging, or we've got this positive messaging, and then you've got to kind of make a hard right turn. So what types of things do you have in the back of your mind? What's your checklist when you've got to shift gears from sell into maybe a different mode of communication or promotion?
Well, and honestly, this could be a couple things. It could be because I was so new, so I wasn't deeply ingrained in those old ways of doing things. It was easier for me to maybe make a shift. But also we have a relatively small team. It's smaller than you might expect for a national brand, not dissimilar to the size teams that you all have. And so, there isn't like, oh, this is my job and I have to do these things. We already were working in a really agile way because we were small. And so whenever anything came in that was hot, like someone would pick it up. And it wasn't about like, doing things the same way all the time. It was always a rotating body of work. This was just a really extraordinarily different rotating body of work.
You mentioned small teams, and I'm looking out in the room. I know a lot of the folks here, and I know some folks are one-person shops, couple-of-person shops. That's tough work to do, right? So when you think about your team, how do you maintain that creative energy within a small group?
Yeah, so leading my team, it's really important to me that I am dividing up the unsexy work equally and the fun work equally. Like if I see someone's really getting stuck in some repetitive work, making sure that I'm injecting their workload with something that's exciting and interesting. I'll say, hey, I'm working on a kind of cool social media project. Are you interested in pairing up? Like offering them like some fun, creative things to infuse a little energy into their workload. But also, we've been really working on something that we like to call T-shaped competencies. And maybe this is something that is a common term. I don't know where it came from. But basically, imagine I'm making a tea. There we go. Imagine I'm making a tea with my hand. With our team, we have like a variety of people who have a depth in certain areas. And what we're trying to do is make sure that everyone then has a broad understanding of a lot of different areas. So everyone has like their expertise, but really pulling them out of their expertise and saying like, hey, have you ever thought about photography? Have you ever thought about writing something? Have you ever thought about social media? And pulling them out and getting them some experience in a lot of different competencies, which A, we need to survive with small teams, right? B, it makes things more interesting. You aren't getting stuck in doing that same thing every single day.
That has to help with burnout then too, right? Because that is another aspect of small teams and then incredibly difficult work, right? And for higher ed, I feel like we have gotten on the treadmill, turned it all the way up since the pandemic, and then not turned it down, right? I don't know if any of your teams are feeling that, but it's constant level of work. So how do you manage burnout, workload with that team?
Yeah, I mean, at some point you have to make the conscious decision to turn it down. Like you just have to. We did that where we said, okay, stop. What is the most meaningful work we should be doing right now? It isn't throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. You've been doing that. You know the things that are going to stick the most. Start focusing your time on those things and the stuff that's really going to be moving the needle, and not just trying everything, because that's going to be the surest way to burning yourself out. So really making that shift, saying, okay, what's the 20% of stuff that's really, really, really moving the needle, focusing more of your time behind that instead of like the 80% of stuff that's like, well, maybe that could work. We should try it. You don't have teams big enough to just keep trying everything. You know?
Right. So with brands, especially national brands, you kind of watch their social media and what is the personality of that particular brand? I always think of Wendy's Twitter as, a social media brand that has this kind of off-kilter, very sarcastic brand image. So how do you determine what your brand image is going to be publicly in a space like Twitter or Instagram? And then walk us through that process of kind of figuring out what is the brand personality, because I think that's something that we have to work with too, especially when we're thinking about how our presidents represent themselves publicly or how we represent the institution, and not just run after, oh, well, this is funny or this is serious.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you really need to do some exercises in what are our values. If my organization were a person, what would their personality traits be? What are the primary things that we try to communicate and make sure that that's reflected in the personality? So like, for example, with Purell, it's really important for us that people understand that, like, we're science-based, you know. You heard a lot during the pandemic about people, you know, mixing their own hand sanitizer using vodka from the grocery store and whatnot, you know.
You're saying that's
this
bad?
It's, well, you know.
So I should get rid of
I don't see many people
stockpiles?
Continuing that practice now that hand
That's a
sanitizer
good
is regularly
note.
available.
Hot tip, folks. Get rid of your buckets.
But like there is a precise formulation. There is a lot of science and thought that goes behind that. It isn't always made the same everywhere. And so like really helping people understand that science behind that is important to us. And so like there needs to be a little of that infused into the personality, but not so stuffy that it's unfun anymore. You know, there's also this side of like, hey, you know, this is something that helps you get out into the world and have fun and have a good time. And then also just like, again, back to the formulation, it's not gonna strip your hands of like the moisture, you know, the moisture that's in your hands. It's not gonna hurt your hands like a bottle of vodka at the grocery store would. It's got good stuff in there that helps your hands too. And so you think about like, okay, so we're helpful, we try to have fun, we're also a little nerdy, and then infusing all of that into a personality that we bring onto social media. So it's really about doing those exercises for who you are as an organization as well.
So what was it like talking to your CEO about adorkable?
Yeah, I almost went there with it. So that fusion of fun but nerdy, I said, you know, we're adorkable, and that is not a term that I coined, but they're like, did you make that up? I said, no, I cannot take credit for that. But like, they were just so fascinated by this idea that there could be like almost a persona to who we were. And, you know, in my mind, it is adorkable. And so we're playing around with that as like a way to present ourselves.
But you had to do a little level up for your CEO.
Oh, she really enjoyed it. Like it's a word that like has always been true about us, but she didn't know what the word was. And so, I shared that with her. And then the next day she was dropping that a few times in conversation. So I think it stuck.
Yeah, I think that's a struggle regardless of the industry, but it certainly happens in higher ed where you are trying to pitch an idea to leadership that they either don't understand or they're not comfortable with it, and you're trying to break through. I heard a colleague in another session talk about the reverse of hearing something from the C-suite and then trying to figure out what that actually means and how to translate it. So talk about both things, how you kind of pitch ideas like that to the CEO or the C-suite and try to get them to understand or okay that even if they don't get it, and then also how do you take that C-suite speak and translate it back out to your team?
Look, don't get too hung up on C-suite. They're human. And so like if they aren't getting your idea, that's your first audience that you're trying your idea out on. Maybe it's just not going to hit the way that you think it is. You know, like they are human beings. Like,
right. Allegedly.
So if they aren't getting it, if they aren't energized by it, maybe it does need some retooling, and that's okay. They're here to protect you too and make sure you don't go out there and completely fall on your face. So think about it more that way, like, oh, it's not the C-suite. Like these are human beings who care about you and your work and your organization and really want it to succeed. So if you can get them energized about something, that can make you feel really good and confident when you go out into the world with that idea too. And then what was the second part of that question?
I think the second question was when you get a message or messaging or, hey, here's what we'd like to get out there from the C-suite, and you're in your mind thinking, I don't know what the heck you just said. Yeah. How do you translate? How do you push back? How do you help your team execute?
So again, they're human. They just want to be heard. And so consider the idea that they've given you as a starting point. Don't immediately start pushing back. Make sure that you try something like, okay, here's what I think that you said. Is this what you said? And show maybe how it isn't working. it's a yes and maybe we could do this to enhance the idea. Is that a common theme here? Yes,
that's and. Like no.
Yes, and
here. And we should really do this.
But I always consider whatever idea they throw out there as like the starting point. I need to do at least that well. But if I come in with better than that idea, who's going to be upset about better than that idea? But you have to at least consider the idea, at least try something with it, because they want to know that they were heard, and that you were infusing the idea in some way, or showcasing like, yes, I tried it, but here's where it falls apart a little bit. Could we try this? And then you're just going to be starting at a much more positive space than immediately pushing back.
Good advice. Good advice. So when I think about Purell, I also think of Kleenex, and I mean that in sort of like the capital K, small K of Kleenex, and where you have this thing the brand becomes the reference to all things in that category. So is that a struggle for your team to differentiate, or is that a positive? Maybe it's a little bit of both.
Sure, yeah, the commodification of a brand is challenging because, it's excellent because we are considered the standard in people's brain, but to the point where they stop even using the word hand sanitizer and they might be out there using something that's kind of junky and calling it Purell as well. So that's where it's a negative. Our name is in everyone's mind, in everyone's mouths, and that's excellent. But then they're just calling whatever has any, resemblance to our product also Purell, and it's like, okay. So, we do a lot of work in our messaging about differentiation, and not all hand sanitizers are the same. And, here's where we offer you something different for sure.
And to be clear, only the name Purell should be in your mouth, not the product.
Not the product. Do not drink the hand sanitizer, please.
Again, pro tip, folks.
I don't want any uptick at poison control saying the Purell lady
no one
told
would
me
say
to.
That. So you mentioned before you're a recovering journalist.
Yes.
That's a common theme with our members. So what benefits did you get from that experience, and how have you translated into the work that you're doing in a different industry?
Honestly, courage. A lot of my leadership skills came from journalism. I didn't like being a reporter on the street, so I immediately started working up to like more of the editor level stuff so that I could not be out there talking to strangers about stuff all the time. But like the leadership skills I developed there were huge in translating. And also just like, I'm sure you all know, the ability to take a complex story and boil it down to just a few words, like get it down to a headline version. Like that's essential in marketing. People don't want to hear you going on forever with your story. Like how can you distill that into a value proposition that's 8 words or less?
We talked a little bit about this before, but when I think a struggle for community college communicators and marketers is that the work is cyclical, and a lot of times the messaging can be the same year over year. And I would imagine that in the hand sanitizer world, you've got a couple of things that are pretty core to what you're talking about. So how do you get into the differentiation or changing of the message so it does stay fresh?
Yeah, well, there's a few things there. I think it is important to keep things fresh, not only for your audience, but for your own sanity. But you also have to remember the vast majority of people you're speaking to haven't heard your message. So, when we talk about like the best ways to spend your time, you don't have to throw away everything that you've said before just for the sake of being fresh. Like it should be reserved for when you really do have something new to say, but rely on that work that's already been done. Don't think, oh, that's stale, that's overdone. Like the work's already done for you, and there are people who haven't heard that message yet. rely on that, figure out like, well, maybe I spend more time on the design, making it look different, making it pop in a new way, but continuing to repeat that message that served you well is okay too. But in terms of like when you do need to approach things from a fresh angle, I don't know, my brain is just always on. I can't turn the marketing brain off. So I'm always looking out at the world and saying, oh, look at what that bread company is doing. That's interesting. I wonder how I could twist that into being about hand sanitizer in some way. And so like, just, stay curious, stay open, and look at all marketing that's out there. And if it caught your eye, it probably is going to catch someone else's eye too. Mm-hmm. And if there's a way that you can, steal that in a way that isn't stealing it, because you're approaching it in a completely fresh way by turning it into community colleges instead of bread.
We call that the case method.
Yes.
Copy and steal everything.
Yes.
So you mentioned jewelry before.
Yes.
Can we talk about the brand that you worked for before? Can we mention that?
Sure.
It was K's, right?
I worked for K Jewelers. Yeah.
Okay. Did you come up with that insidious "every kiss begins with K"
No, my
jingle?
boss did though, and she's a lovely woman.
I mean, does anyone else just find themselves singing that randomly?
Hey, wait, stop. But you do. You all know it.
Every kiss begins with K. Come on. I mean, I'll be driving to work and that just pops into my head randomly.
That's gold, because you all knew what he meant. Gold.
Okay. So we can kind of blame you, though, is what I'm hearing.
No. No. But you cannot attack the person who did it.
But you'll take it back.
I will defend them.
You'll take back my comments to your former boss. Please. That is very good. It's very good. It's stuck in my head. All right. So I know we've got a couple of audience questions, I'm sure, and I want to give folks a chance to ask you a couple of questions. So we'll do a little rapid fire here before we do that. So is soap allowed in Purell headquarters?
Oh, we sell soap.
Oh.
We have a huge market in soap.
Okay.
Yes, we love soap.
All right.
You should wash your hands.
Want to make sure, Wait. It might be like a no soap policy there.
Sanitizer is for when you don't have access to a sink and water.
Okay.
Soap is for when you do. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Actually, I said hand sanitizer was invented in 1988, but our company's been around for over 75 years. We started with waterless hand cleaner from Gojo. If you know anyone who's like auto mechanic or in manufacturing, like that's really our roots in manufacturing and finding hand cleaning solutions that would strip all the nasty chemicals from people's hands without hurting their hands.
Does your company make that sawdust that they used to put down in grade school when someone vomited in the classroom?
Okay, all right, wait. So that's a funny story. When I switched from K...
That was a real shot in the dark.
When I switched from K Jewelers to Purell, they had me working on these new body fluid spill kits.
Oh, boy.
And I'm sitting there and I'm writing about, and that's a very small part of our business, but I am writing about these.
I would hope so.
And I say, oh no, I've made a mistake. I used to be writing about engagement rings and now I am writing about the sawdust. And
that's a much different jingle, too.
Yeah, that was...
Every vomit is covered in our sawdust. You can have that one. It's free.
But, as with anything, you have to remember how important this product is to the people who need it, and you focus on that, and you do the work.
That's right. All right, what's your favorite scent of Purell, and what is your least favorite scent of Purell? I believe there's scents. I know there's not flavors. There are not flavors, but there might be scents.
So there's actually in some of the versions that don't necessarily have a scent listed, it's like almost like a lemongrass type scent in there, and I just find it really refreshing. The ones that are actually scented, I like the energizing mint.
Oh.
That's a favorite of mine.
Okay.
I don't think I have a least favorite scent. We don't have that.
It'd be
We're
hard
very
to say
selective
that.
about
Yeah.
the scents so that it doesn't get out of control and get really wild with.
You don't have like a spiced pumpkin for the fall?
We don't, no.
Okay.
No pumpkin spice.
All right, so I'm going to ask our executive producer, Jacqueline Garver, to come up here and hold the microphone for us while I ask this next question. So, if you're out in the world, you see folks using Purell, and some folks will use a very little bit, and some folks will use gobs and gobs, and then they're like, hey, will you take some of this off of my hands? And I'm like, no, that completely defeats the point. So, Dana, what is the correct amount, and will you demonstrate?
Actually, Jacqueline, could you grab your bottle for this demonstration?
Very good.
The bottle I have here is our 1 ounce bottle, and we always say, in general, the recommendation is enough to cover your hands. Don't get out of control with it, but like that little spritz isn't going to kill 99.99% of the germs that may cause illness. So this one, it's just a flip cap, and so it's 1 squirt of that, but just enough to cover your hands. With this bottle here, there's actually a nice little pump on there, and so it is, oops, this isn't twisted.
Oh, I didn't twist it, sorry.
Is 2 pumps of this little guy, but if you see one of our dispensers out in the world, it's just once. That's kind of the nice thing about like the dispensers is that it doses it for you. You don't have to think about it that much.
That was very refreshing.
And if you have a tabletop bottle, those are also just 1 pump of the hand sanitizer. It's, I believe, 1.1 milliliters is the healthcare standard for hand sanitizer. Right. So we try to meet that with but it's just enough to cover your hands. You don't have to get that technical.
If you're one of those goop hands people where you're putting a lot on there, just stop. You don't need it. You're wasting it.
Or if you've seen some of them where, you just do like 1 little mist, that's not going to be enough to cover your hands.
Okay. And don't forget about soap.
And don't forget about soap. Yeah, please keep washing your hands.
Please keep washing your hands, you filthy people. Let's give Dana a round of applause. My hands smell delightful right now. Thank you very much.
That's calming lavender.
Yeah, I'm very calm. I could fall asleep up here right now. Let's get some questions from the audience. What did I forget to ask Dana? Come on, there must be someone with a burning question about hand sanitizer. You woke up this morning and you were like, I will ask this question. Let's see if we can get a microphone over to our friend back there.
I know that the Touchland spray hand sanitizers have become very popular because of the packaging. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys can remain competitive when you have like disruptors enter the market like that?
Yeah, so like I'm gonna try and answer that without getting too much into it, but I think the focus is to not get hung up on who they are and what they're doing, but really like dig into who you are, and I know that this isn't necessarily like something that, you're not gonna have like a competing community college come in and try and like poach this, but you are competing against some of those big players. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really about like not trying to talk about them and what they're doing wrong, but talk about you and like what you're bringing to the table, and just really like digging into that like that positive approach about like, here is what we're doing differently, here is the way that we function, here is why you can be excited or proud or energized about using this product, and just continue to put your best self forward.
Excellent. Another question. All right, right over there.
I have to imagine that there's days that marketing hand sanitizer is not maybe your passion, or maybe you're getting like, it's feeling like a little stale. So how do you continue energizing yourself and your team when we don't have a global pandemic to continue to be excited about marketing hand sanitizer.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier, like, how do you keep the messaging fresh? I think it's more how do you keep the tactics fresh? So again, with small teams, it's like, is there something that we're not doing that we could learn how to do? Could we learn how to make videos better? Could we learn maybe we get into podcasting, maybe we get into a new style of like trending social media videography, or maybe we learn how to do this. It's more about like the people and the competencies. Like that's always where my focus is. It's less on like the product, and my energy really comes from my people, making sure that they're well taken care of, making sure that they feel that they're having growth opportunities in their career, that they're trying new things that are exciting. And then, yeah, the product is still there. And, we release new products too, which get people energized, which is a little bit different than maybe what all of you are encountering day to day. But it's really about like focusing on putting people first and us as individuals, and not focusing on that product that we're selling all the time.
Excellent. Other questions for Dana?
I'm always interested in tips about remote work, and I was wondering what your tips are as a manager dealing with employees all over the place. Just any best practices for having a team who is working remotely.
So when the pandemic hit, we went entirely remote for a couple years. We haven't walked away from that entirely either. We're coming in as needed, but there is still that like hybrid model where like some people stay home all the time, some people are in office all the time, others of us are just there as needed. And so there's a lot of different people working in a lot of different ways, and keeping them, feeling they're all part of the same team and they're cohesive, like that is a challenge. But we try to find little ways to bond digitally as well. When we do come in, making sure that like it's an activity that is fun for everyone. I have one person who lives on the other side of the country on my team, but he has family out here. So whenever he is in town, I'm like, okay, that's the day we're all getting together, everyone, and we make a big deal out of that to make him feel included. But there's also ways that like we can connect digitally. We have a meeting every week where everyone just goes around the room and talks about what their intentions are for the week. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what my struggles are. Here's what I hope to get accomplished this week. And that really helps everyone to feel connected into the work that's happening and like, invested in what their partners are doing on the team. We also, and I can't take credit for this, but before me, we started a practice of doing personal shares where people will put together a presentation. It doesn't have to be long, but it's on any topic that you want. And, we have one or two of those presented a month, and we get to learn about, and we've rotated through the whole team several times now. But people get to share something that they really care about, or that they've recently learned, or that they're interested in. So we get to learn something about our teammates. And at the same time, they're honing their presentation skills. They're making a PowerPoint presentation. They're speaking in front of, their teammates in a meeting, which might not be something that their particular role challenges them to do. But now they're honing the skill as well that they can take into other opportunities, or if they are put in a position where they need to present a deck in a meeting, they've now had some practice at that. And at the same time, we're learning about each other and having a little fun.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all for being a part of this live recording of the Can You Make It Pretty podcast. And once again, let's thank Dana Shaffer of Purell for being a part of the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it.
Can You Make It Pretty is presented by the National Council for Marketing and Public Relations. NCMPR is the country's premier group for PR, communications, and marketing pros at two-year colleges. Can You Make It Pretty is mixed by Bill Aldridge at Third City Sound in Joliet, Illinois, and produced by me. I'm Jacqueline Johanna Garver, and I'm the Communication and DEI Manager for NCMPR. Can You Make It Pretty is available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. If you like what you've heard, we'd love it if you subscribed, downloaded, rated, and reviewed.